Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by Jon Bon's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search Jon Bon's. That's Combest, Jon Bon's, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's EGGBURT, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
And as Mr. Egbert said, this is the BJ Show, bjshow.co. Okay, John, yesterday you sent me an interesting article, and it was funny that you sent me that article on the DEA, and we'll talk about that in depth in a minute. And I know there's going to be some people going to go, the DEA, what's he going to talk about? The interesting aspect of this is that the day before, you sent that to me Tuesday, yesterday, and then Monday I read this really interesting article about all the things that President Biden is doing to change all these rules and regulations to essentially curry the favor of the younger voters.
Yes, that's right. Now, what are some of the other ones, Brad?
Well, quite a few different things. Obviously the student loan forgiveness kind of thing is a big deal. But essentially, the marijuana thing, and I know this is going to be sort of boring and dry. We'll just start this off, but let me just explain the whole thing, that currently marijuana federally is listed as a Schedule 1 narcotic. And Schedule 1 narcotics, I believe all of them are illegal. Schedule 1 narcotics include cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. LSD. They're all Schedule 1. Schedule 2 drugs are essentially methadone, oxycodone, fentanyl, and they are they're narcotics that can be prescribed by your doctor, but they are fairly highly regulated. And most of the other drugs that you go to the drugstore for when you go to get a prescription are essentially what they call Schedule 3 drugs. So what they want to do is take marijuana and move it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. Now, my question on that is, and I'm going to ask you because you may or may not have the answer on this, if they do that, doesn't that totally change the whole marijuana Missouri law system? Because essentially, by turning it into a Schedule 3 narcotic, it can be sold at pharmacies, right?
I don't know. I think what they're saying, though, is that it's still not approved for recreational use, Brad.
Well, that's the other aspect of it, is that essentially, and this is the thing that I'm going like, okay, so where does Missouri and all these other states that have now legalized recreational marijuana, how does this fit in? Because essentially, a Schedule 3 narcotic, you just can't go to Walgreens or CVS or your local drugstore, if there is one left anymore, and say, hey, give me that pill. And the pharmacist is going to say, I'm sorry, do you have a prescription? Well, it's Schedule 3. Do I need a prescription? And he's going to say, yes, you need a prescription. So essentially, wouldn't that mean that if they classify it, at least nationally, marijuana as Schedule 3, that you'd have to go to your doctor to get a prescription for marijuana?
I don't know, Brad. I don't know what has precedent there.
Well, it's here we go again where we've got, and hold on, I got to wipe my face. You're going to laugh when I tell you this. Hold on. I got to hit the microphone. My eye is just like driving me nuts this morning. Anyway, the situation is that how the states have gotten away with this is that it's a, shall we say, legal conundrum. Because
absolutely. That's a great way to put it, Brad.
Because of the fact that the federal government says it's class as Schedule 1 narcotic, marijuana is. And the states essentially said, well, we're just not going to pay attention to the federal government. And there's people like me in the radio business that we are told by our advisors, National Association of Broadcasters, and most of your communications attorneys, they will tell us, do not take any ads for marijuana dispensaries. Now, there are some stations that have done that. And the reason we've been told that is because it puts us into a gray area of the law that essentially, when we come up for a license renewal, or let's say we do something where the FCC slaps our wrists, and they also would say, hey, by the way, your tower lights weren't working the other night. We're going to send you a fine. And by the way, we listened to your station, and we heard you advertising for a marijuana dispensary.
Yeah.
Isn't that? Hold it. We're the federal government, and as far as we're concerned, we're the FCC, and those other people down the street in D.C., they're the DEA. That's illegal. That would be like you saying, hey, go to your local fentanyl distributor and buy some fentanyl. Illegal. Yep. So the crazy part of this is, you know who the marijuana dispensaries have been a boon for?
I don't know.
The billboard industry. Drive around St. Louis.
Wow, I see.
You see billboards everywhere for marijuana dispensaries. Everywhere. I mean, to the point where, and I used to have a guy who I had a lot of respect for. The guy's name was Vince Miller, and he ran DDI, which originally was Drury Displays. Now it's DDI Media. And Vince and I had many long conversations about the billboard industry. I was a bit fascinated by billboards. And this is an area where they're not regulated by the federal government, although to a certain extent they are, but that's a whole crazy thing. They're regulated by the state government with MoDOT and things like that, but yet the dispensaries are becoming a big segment of advertising for the billboard industry because, they put up a billboard. Hey, you're driving at I-70, get off at the next exit, get high, then get back on I-70.
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Well, and Brad, we've talked about this before too, but the other big boom, the other big industry is the cash management industry. So Brinks, we talked about this on one of the earliest shows, because the laws are so murky, you could say, around federal transfer. Brinks is up 39% over the last year. The S&P's up roughly 22% over the last year. And uniquely, Brad, upon this news yesterday, among the original leak that this could happen, Brinks was down like 3 or 4% yesterday because as we move away from purely cash, Brinks is going to have – let me look. Yeah, Brinks was down 3% yesterday. As we move away from just cash, it's going to hurt companies like Brinks.
Do you own Brinks?
I do own Brinks. Yeah, I'm long Brinks.
Wow, interesting.
Now, I was heavily long MSOS, and I reduced my position at the end of last week. And MSOS, which is the ETF that owns a number of cannabis companies, Brad was up 25% yesterday.
Now,
but you know what? All you can do is you play the field that's in front of you, and you look back and say somebody knew. Like, obviously, people know that this is going to happen. And MSOS had a lot of strength in the last few weeks. But you know what? To quote the great Jim Cramer, Brad, nobody ever got hurt taking a profit.
Explain what an ETF is.
An exchange-traded fund. So, Brad, today I'll probably buy a little uranium, as an example. And an exchange-traded fund is just a big pot of money that's invested in either one segment of stocks or one segment of commodities. Now, in the olden days, if you wanted to buy uranium, you were SOL. Like, it was very hard to get yourself some exposure to uranium. But today, if you have a E-Trade account or you have an account with Charles Schwab, you just go to the stock market, you go into your app, and you could purchase URA. That's the ticker symbol for a uranium thing. So, Brad, if you want to get long of exposures, oil, UGA, you want to get – if you think the price of gas is going up, Brad, you buy a little UGA. This is not financial advice, by the way. I'm long UGA. You buy a little UGA, and you can have exposure to these commodities. If you want to buy into the marijuana industry without owning individual stocks, if you think that's too risky, buy a little MSOS, and you can have exposure to that industry.
Okay. In the last 2 minutes, John has said DEA, ETF, SGL, MSOS.
MSOS, yeah. MSOS
UGA.
And MSO, by the way, stands for multi-state operator, Brad. That's a key part of marijuana lingo.
And was it UPA as well, too?
No, UGA is – I'm long UGA. This is not financial advice. But if you think that oil has a little bit tighter risk range and you want to be long oil, be long UGA.
And for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, being long means you essentially think that things are going to go well for that stock. Being short, like what Bill Gates does with Elon Musk on the Tesla stock, you short the stock, which means you think the stock is going to tank.
I went much shorter Tesla yesterday, by the way, too, Brad. And full disclosure, I went aggressively long Tesla yesterday. It's had aggressively short. It had a 10% move the other day. Do you know why Tesla skyrocketed the other day, Brad?
Elon was in China, but I don't think that
Yes, that's exactly it.
Was that the reason? Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about FSD, fully self-driving, but apparently it's not even that big of a deal.
Well, the FSD, as you call it, the fully self-driving, has really taken a hit because of the fact that they've really throttled that back, not to use a car euphemism, but essentially the idea behind that there's been a ton of accidents, and now if you know the Tesla deal, they've made it much more difficult for you to essentially go total automated driver, whatever you call it, driverless, whatever, because now they have the camera that checks your retinas, that makes sure you're looking. Because there were stories of guys literally getting in the back seat of their car and going to sleep where the car was driving down the highway. And there have been numerous other accidents caused by the fact that the system did not, detect a tractor trailer that was crossing over the highway or stuff like that. And most of the self-driving aspects of the Tesla, as well as the other cars, you have to touch the steering wheel every once in a while. You have to keep your eyes on the road and things like that. And I think the whole self-driving thing I think you know this because of your stock stuff. Wasn't it Apple that just recently got out of the self-driving thing? Didn't they sell
Yeah, I forgot which. I don't know if it was Apple, but somebody, and so many companies are in this space, Brad. But to answer your question, I don't know if it was Apple that quit that or not.
Well, essentially, they essentially say, we see this way off in the future. We don't think this is going to be a near field play, whatever you want to call it. And technically, I guess what they're saying, they don't see anything happening within the next 10 years. It's not going to happen within 10 years, but who the heck knows what's going to happen, okay?
And at that point in 10 years, they can come in and buy whatever company is doing it well, right?
Yes. Okay, Monday, I'm listening to KWMU. Yes, I do listen to KWMU. John does not. Terry Gross's show. And once again, sometimes we make fun of Terry. Terry is, I don't know if you've ever seen her physically, she's like 4'10", and I mean that sincerely. She's a very tiny woman, and she's done this show in WHYI in Philadelphia for decades, and she is a very skilled interviewer. And she had some of the interviews she does, obviously it takes two to tango. Some of the interviews she has, the people are not that good. She had Jon Bon Jovi on the other day, and it was a fascinating interview. He is incredibly interesting to listen to. And to listen to him describe what he's gone through in his life, the changes in the entertainment industry, the changes in rock and roll and all that kind of stuff, it was a fascinating interview. And I have 10,000% more respect. And I've always liked Jon Bon Jovi. The music, I could take it or leave it. Some of it's very, pop, top 40 kind of rock and roll kind of stuff, whatever you want to look at it. But it was just fascinating listening to him talk about...
Wasn't there some movie that just came out about him?
That's the reason why he's doing this, because he's got a 4-part, and she keeps plugging that. That's why these people, either they write a book or they're on a movie series or a Netflix special or something like that. I think it's a Netflix thing where it's a 4-part series on the history of Jon Bon Jovi, and pretty interesting stuff. But I would have to say that from listening to him, and unfortunately being in this industry where a lot of the people that I worked with way back in the 70s, when I first got in the radio business, who are no longer with us, I always mention Pig Vomit, Kevin Matheny, who passed away, I guess, 6 or 7 years ago. A lot of my guys and occasionally a woman or two that were way back when, that were back in the radio industry, which at that point in time was a very closely related industry to the rock and roll business, are no longer with us because of the fact that they blew out their brains, they blew out their hearts, they blew out whatever organs they had with all the illicit drugs that they used. And he obviously, if he did all the drugs, it sure doesn't tell, because he's not like it's even to the point where, matter of fact, it's funny, I saw an interview the other day with Ted Nugent, where Ted Nugent is telling all these stories about how he's been implicated by all these rock and roll stars. Supposedly, he talked about that he's been accused of having sex with Courtney Love when she was 12 years old, and he went through all these different things. He kept saying, lie, 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 lie. And if you know Ted Nugent, he speaks the same gospel that I do, is that Ted is now, I think, 75 or 76 or something like that, and he talks about all these guys that he knew from the rock and roll industry who are either dead or like the Ozzy Osbourne thing where his mind's just gone. You know what I mean? He's just like...
I do know, yeah.
He's almost like... Would I say Joe Biden would have gotten himself in trouble if I said that?
No, absolutely not, Brad.
The lights are on, but nobody's home, right? Okay, last two things. John got upset with me yesterday because I retweeted something which ultimately went back to Sarah Fenske, okay?
Did you I thought you were just doing reply spam. I didn't know that you retweeted something. I didn't see that.
Well, I retweeted and I replied it because of the fact that you had said something last week about Sarah Fenske, by the way, who was on the air yesterday and did an excellent job on the Legal Roundtable.
Yeah.
And if you ask me, Sarah Fenske Monday through Thursday, Jason Rosenbaum on Friday, every week, that's the way it should be on KWMU. Okay, so the reason I did that was I was trying to reply to a reply from Keanu Reeves. Because when I think I even sent you that, when you and Sarah were going back and forth and had mentioned me in a retweet, he replied to me.
Well, and it's a spam bot, I'm sure, right?
If you read the thing, it says...
Brad, Keanu Reeves didn't reply to a conversation.
No.
Or didn't retweet. It's not actually Keanu Reeves.
It's the official account of him. But as you know, most of these people don't run their own social media. They farm it out. So it was somebody, and I did check this, and this is listed as the official Twitter account of Keanu Reeves. It's not spam in the respect, it's not a bot, but once again, don't think for a minute that Kim Kardashian is walking around with her phone and sending out tweets and Instagrams and things like that. It's not her. That's somebody else that does it. And once again, I go back to my infamous day at T.R. Hughes Ballpark when Shaquille O'Neal was going to engage in a home run contest with... here we go again. I can't. My mind's gone.
Albert Pujols
at T.R. Hughes. And the crazy thing about him getting out of a limousine and nobody saying anything, and the director yelling at the crowd saying, "Hey, this is Shaquille O'Neal," and they get back in the limousine, they drive around the parking lot to get back out, and the crowd goes nuts because the director told them to do it. There was a guy following right behind Shaquille O'Neal who was his Twitter dude, and all he did was follow Shaquille O'Neal around and just tweet all day long.
It's a social content manager, Brad. That's what they do.
Right. That's his job. Just like Trump has Dan Scavino, I think is his name. Do you know who Dan Scavino is?
No, I don't. But you know who else has a social media manager? Taylor Swift, Brad. You know, she just put out a new album.
Really? I didn't know that. I didn't hear anything
about that. We should
that.
talk about it the next break.
I didn't hear anything about that. Okay, so are we going to do Taylor Swift again?
Absolutely, and we're at 741 right now.
We did this last week, and quite honestly, from the YouTube views, it was one of our most successful segments of the show, where John, he throws out a quote, and he asks me if it's Taylor Swift or not. Correct? Or no, hold.
That's correct. Or a specific politician,
yes,
Brad. Last week we did Bill Eigel.
Who's it this
week? And when we come back from break, we'll talk about who we're doing next.
You're not going to tell me right now?
Absolutely not. I am going to tweet at Keanu Reeves, who I just Googled does not have an official Twitter account. But I might Google it a spam bot and see what they have to say.
Well, according to what I found, but you're saying he doesn't have an official Twitter account?
Yeah, no, he doesn't, Brad. But we can I'll just say you're right. But yeah, he doesn't have a Twitter account.
Well, John, you're the expert, so I'll defer to you. Not the first time I've been taken by spam. I mean, to the point where when it was Raquel Welch kept tweeting at me, and I've thought to myself, she kept saying...
I know. And Brad, they always target the legally blind. If a guy's got a handkerchief and he's wiping his face all hour, they're definitely going to target him.
Do you know why that is? They know we're good at Braille.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by Jon Bon Jovi's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search Jon Combest. That's Combest, Jon Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?